All right, good evening, good evening. Happy Thursday. It is February 12th, and we are gearing up to study Genesis 6 today. Remember, we are doing a slow walk through Genesis so that you have time to sit with information. I know it seems like sometimes it's like a lot of new information coming at you. So you need to read the word, you need to sit with the word, you need to read it again, take some notes. And remember that the Bible study guide for those who are subscribed, and you can subscribe in the description box. The Bible study guide is to help aid you in your personal time when you are kind of going back through it, taking your time later on. And we are in Genesis 6 today. So let's jump into it. We are going to read the word per usual. I'm going to share my screen over here on YouTube. We're going to read all the way through it, and then we're going to come back and talk about it verse by verse. Alrighty, so Genesis 6 reads in New Living Translation. Then the people began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw the beautiful women and took any they wanted as their wives. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. In those days, hey, Tyann, thank you, I'm teaching. In those days, and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on the earth. For whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women, they gave birth to children who became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. Verse 5. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth and saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race. I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them. But Noah found favor with the Lord. All right, verse 9. Stick with me. We're going all the way through. Just get it in your spirit. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on earth at the time, and he walked in close fellowship with God. Noah was the father of three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now God saw that the earth had become corrupt and was filled with violence. God observed all this corruption in the world, for everyone on earth was corrupt. So God said to Noah, I have decided to destroy all living creatures, for they have filled the earth with violence. Yes, I will wipe them all out along with the earth. Build a large boat from cypress wood and waterproof it with tar inside and out. Then construct decks and stalls throughout its interior. Make the boat 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Leave an 18-inch opening below the roof all the way around the boat. Put the door on the side and build 3 decks inside the boat, lower, middle, upper. Verse 17. Look, I am about to cover the earth with a flood that will destroy every living thing that breathes. Everything on earth will die, but I will confirm my covenant with you. So enter the boat, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring a pair of every kind of animal, a male and female, into the boat with you to keep them alive during the flood. Pairs of every kind of bird and every kind of animal and every kind of small animal that scurries along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. And be sure to take on board enough food for your family and for all the animals. Verse 22, so Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him. Now we're going back to the top, y'all. All right, stick with me. Feel free to share this with somebody. who may not have ever really understood and read the story of Noah. So let me bring you all back and remind you of where we've come the last 5 weeks. Genesis 1 covered the first 6 days of creation. God created everything on earth in 6 days. Sun, moon, stars, the people, all the animals. It took 6 days total to make everything. Land, sky, everything. Chapter 2 moves into specifics on how he created man, male and female. He created them and where he placed them and all that he developed and provided for them. So he also covered the seventh day, which is critical. We talked about this, how we're out of order with our days, our weeks, our months, everything. You need to catch that one. Go back and catch that one if you want to really understand how it works. The calendar is supposed to work. So it covered the seventh day as well in the Sabbath. So chapters 1 and 2 only covered 7 days. So in the Bible, you have to read the details to understand the time, because how we say time happens, as far as like, let's say today is February 12th, 2026. We give like a specific date. That's not how it was. You have to read and see how much time was passing to better understand the context that you're in. So then we go to chapter 3. Chapter 3 did not happen within the first 7 days. Chapter 3 happened many years later. Chapter 3 is when Adam and Eve partook of the fruits. They were in the garden, but it didn't happen when they were just first in the garden. They sit in the garden for a day and now the serpent coming to them. That's not how that worked. So you have to kind of like really envision the time that happened. They would have been in the garden for many, many, many years. We know that because later on in chapter 5, it tells us that Adam did not have Seth until I think he was 130 years old. So because we know when Adam had Seth, we know that prior to that he had Cain and Abel, and he had Cain and Abel after he came out of the garden. So like you just put the timeline together and kind of do an estimate. That's how you come up with that. Then in chapter 4, we have Cain and Abel's story. And that's when we start really getting into the dividing of lineages. And I mention it because it talks about Noah's spiritual inheritance in chapter 6. And so I really want to make sure that we understand where that spiritual inheritance came from. And that's when we was going through chapter 4. And it was really breaking down, okay, this is Cain's lineage. And this is Seth. And Seth lineage really goes into detail in chapter 5. People skip over it. Chapter 5 is one of the most critical chapters you can read in Genesis because it goes through the whole timeline. It tells you how long Adam lived. So Adam is from day 6 of creation all the way to he lived until he was 930 years old. It goes into every generation for 10 generations. It ends with Noah. That covers 1,000, a little over 1,500 years. We're just gonna go with round numbers. It covers a little over 1,500 years. So by the time we hit Genesis 6, we are right about that time. Genesis 6 starts with the overall summative statement. It says, then, that's giving us time. Then the people began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them. It's describing the time. What was this time like that it's describing of then? The sons of God saw the beautiful women and took any they wanted as their wives. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. Excuse me, y'all. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. So we have to pause before we really read it to better understand what is the times like. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read 4 because that gives us a good synopsis of what these times were like. In those days and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on the earth. For whenever the sons of God had intercourse with them, they gave birth to children who became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. Okay, so now we got to go back to the top so we can better understand the then it's referring to. If you understand anything about population, then you understand that it's very easy to multiply population. But when we're talking about a multiplied population, we're not just talking about like Adam and Eve's immediate descendants and maybe their descendants. We're talking about by the time, because we know that Adam had other sons and daughters. By the time those sons and daughters had children, those sons and daughters had children, all those children have multiplied. You probably have really easily 10x your population within, for them it would have been like a 300-year span, maybe 400-year span. Um, and so when it talks about multiplying, most likely when you look at just how population multiplies, you're talking about between the fifth and seventh generation. This is happening where the people are really beginning to multiply. So when it says the people began to multiply on earth and daughters were born into them, we can kind of know like what time period this is referring to. Now, I sent y'all the timeline last week in my newsletter. If you're not signed up, you need to go get signed up, because you'll get a link to the news. You'll get a link to the Bible study guide, which has the information for the timeline. I did a whole spreadsheet so you can see when was Adam born, when was Seth born, when was all the children born, and how long they lived, and who died when. Like, it's gonna give you the whole thing on the spreadsheet. It's very interesting. I took a lot of time to do that. So, and I just shared it with you. So you should definitely go and read Genesis through the lens of like that timeline. So I'm gonna pull up my spreadsheet so I can tell you about the time that this would have been taking place. So I just told you it was like the fifth or sixth generation that this would have probably started. So if we look at the timeline, that is about the time that Kenan was born. Kenan is also Canaan, depending on which Bible translation you read. So Kenan was born about around year 240. Kenan was born around year 330. And so, but somewhere between year 330, let me make sure I'm looking at yes. So somewhere around year 330, all the way up until about Enoch's generation, because Enoch was the seventh generation. That would have been, tell y'all, so you have an idea just in your head, if you're a time person like I am, somewhere between about year 330 and 630, this started happening where people were being multiplied on the earth. Okay, so now we know that daughters are born unto them. Now, who are the sons of God that is introducing to us into? Because the sons of God are really causing the problem. This is why it's important to understand what's going on at this time period, because it's the sons of God that are the issue. Let's go. It doesn't tell us in Genesis. It tells us it's in another portion of the Bible. Satan got kicked out of heaven. Satan was an angel. Satan was an angel, like at the level of what we would consider Michael and Gabriel to be archangels. When he got kicked out of heaven, it says a third of them got kicked out with him. A third of the angels got kicked out with him. When it says sons of God, it is referring to those other angels that got kicked out with Satan. What they did, it says the sons of God saw the beautiful women. So the women are humans. It's important. The women are humans made in the image of God. The sons of God are angels. They are not humans. We are not told exactly how they are created. We just know that they are not the initial creation that God made in Genesis to be here on earth. So the sons of God are outside of like what we would consider human DNA. But obviously, they got enough to mate with them, because it's about to tell us that, they begot sons. So they mated with humans. They took any that they wanted as their wives. Take a pick, right? It's so many. That's why we have to know, like, when did this really start multiplying, to estimate when did this happen? Because all population does is continue to multiply. So if you get some bad DNA in your gene pool, it's going to continue to multiply into bad DNA. And I don't mean bad DNA as in like maybe birth defects. I'm saying bad DNA is in moral character and all those things that end up happening. Took any that they wanted as their wives. So here's the Lord's response. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. Well, we know that that's significant because if we just read in Genesis 5 last week how all these people were living, like they didn't really start having children until they were about 150 years old on average. So they're living until they're 700, 800, 900 years old. They're living for a very long time. They've been living for a very long time now. Not in a sinful state like with Adam and Eve sin. Now they're living for a long time in this evil state that it's about to sort of explain a little bit more. And so when God is saying my spirit will not put up with, we have to really understand what is he trying to say. He's not just changing their lifespan for no reason. He's actually changing it to be able to help us. So I meditated on this. And it God reminded me of the fact that in Genesis 3, he breathed life into man and it became a living being. So he creates man. Man does not have life in him. God takes time to breathe his breath into man to create a living being. He put his spirit into man. So what makes humans human and living is because we have the spirit of God in us. All right. So he took time to breathe into us in Genesis 3. Because we have the spirit of the Lord in us, the Lord is saying that man cannot continue to live with my spirit for such a long time because our bodies, our mortal flesh is very temporary. So essentially what he's saying is I need to create an avenue for them to get into their immortal bodies sooner rather than later in order to help them live better, because right now they are not living properly. And in order for help them live better, I have to give them a shorter life. Because if we just think we're going to live forever, I mean, I can imagine being Adam and he just year after year, he just living. And you Methuselah, year after year, you just living. At some point, you are opening yourself up, like opening that door up for more temptation and more evil to take place. So God, just like he kicked them out of the garden and said, I can't have them in the garden because then they would live in this sin state forever. If they took part of that tree, the tree of life, which they could have eaten from, he never told them not to eat from that tree, but because they took part of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they were now in a sinful state. So if you're in a sinful state, and then you eat of the tree of life, which allows you to live forever, then you live forever in your sin. In that same vein of thinking, God is like, I cannot have my spirit dwell in them for so many years. I need to shorten their lifespan in order to help them. So because we now know that life is short, we live a better life now. So it was really to help us. So then he takes it a little step further, because we have to really understand the heart of where God is coming from when he says this, because it's a punishment in one way, but it's really not a punishment if you really look at the full context of it. So then he says, the longer his spirit is striving in human flesh, striving is the word that's used in the KJV, and like in KJV, it says my spirit will not put up with in NLT, which means it will not remain in. But in KJV, it's strive. So when you look at the Hebrew word that they use to put for strive, it's saying contend with. Essentially, the longer that I allow my spirit, this is God saying this, the longer I allow my spirit to be in human flesh, to strive in human flesh, the more that God would have to do to contend for, to execute judgment for, on. Like we're saying that you have to do more work to make us righteous. So instead of having to do all that work, I'm going to shorten their lifespan. They'll live better because they won't live for such a long time. And I won't have to strive so much to get them to live the type of life that I want them to live. I want them to be eternal and live with me and dwell with me and enjoy my presence. But they cannot do that if they remain in this mortal flesh. This mortal flesh is leading to evil. He's watching it happen, and he's like, yeah, so we're going to go ahead and shorten that lifespan to 120 years. I don't know about y'all. I'll take that because I want to live for 120 years. If that's what I have, is 120 years, optional based on my living right. I want to get to 120 years, which is still a very long time. So it's a benefit. Is what I really want you to see that in verse 3. It's not a curse. It's a benefit because of what was going on. Now I need you to understand. It says in verse 4, in those days and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on the earth. For whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women, they gave birth to children who became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. This is telling us a lot of information. This is telling us about what was put into the human DNA and what was being produced. Now, if you read that, you're like, oh, well, that probably sounds good. Now, Mind you, this is the what is considered the antediluvian. I done said it wrong. Antediluvian period, meaning before the flood. Ante before diluvian flood. This is the pre-flood period. We have no conception of what life was like this at this time. Life is nothing like what we live now in our modern society, even what we know about like ancient times, nothing like that. Why? Because they got big old giants walking around living on the earth. And they have people who are not people, who are angelic beings that are married to women that's breeding people who are creating evil on earth. Like it's a completely, the landscape looks different. Remember, this is pre-flood. The Pangea has not happened, meaning the Tower of Babel, where he shook it up in all the languages. None of that exists. This is only a time where everybody speaks the same language. Everybody, I'm assuming this part, everybody lives in the same area, or like geographically, everything is sort of like the same climate or whatever. All of those, none of that has been created yet. And this is becoming dangerous. So not only do you have everybody living together and speaking the same language and stuff, now you have people, and I'm saying people because I don't know what to call them, like they're the people angels, the fallen angels who have created children. They are not the good angels. They are the fallen angels. They have produced offspring that are now running rampant on earth. This is just pure evil. Why is it pure evil? Because it's not the good that God designed. When God designed Adam and Eve, he designed two human beings to produce, and he told them to be fruitful and multiply. He never gave permission for the angels to be fruitful and multiply. So what they're producing on earth is opposite of what God told Adam and Eve to produce on earth. This is good, what Adam and Eve was producing. What them fallen angels was producing, not good. So it turns into evil. We know this because now we get down to verse 5, and it said, the Lord observed the extent of human wickedness. When was he observing it? Then, when the people of the earth began to multiply. And in those days, and for some time after, it's telling us who lived. So it's observing during this time where these giants are living, that the extent of human wickedness on earth. Now, I forgot to emphasize that it says that they gave birth to children who became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. So I think in our current mindset, who may come to mind is someone like a Nimrod, someone like a Gilgamesh that you hear about in like ancient stories. Those type of people who are in like ancient Greek mythology would have been who they were producing like in their DNA. So it's hard for us to imagine it, but I just wanted to give you all a picture. What also came to mind to me, for those who have seen, I'm not into like vampire movies, but I have seen Twilight. And y'all remember, I don't forgot the girl name on Twilight, but y'all remember in one of the movies, they got married and then she had a baby. If you paid attention, that baby was growing at an alarming rate. It was not growing like a normal child. So imagine that in pre-flood times where these people are giants and they're growing and producing. And not only are they just growing and producing in large size, but they're also producing evil. And I can say that they're producing evil because they were not producing within the bounds that God had given. He said Adam and Eve, and he gave them and told them to be blessed and to multiply across the earth. He never said that for anybody else outside of the human race. Okay. So now when it says in those days as well, this is Moses writing. Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. He's the known author for the first 5 books of the Bible. So when he's explaining it in the future and writing it in the future to explain what was happening before that time period. I hope that makes sense for you. Because Moses comes way later. Moses does not enter our scene until Exodus. We in the beginning of Genesis still. So Moses is saying in those days, like basically saying back in the day, and he's really referring to pre-flood times and what would be ancient times for them. He's saying this is what was going on. Okay, so it's being written from that perspective. I told y'all about the antediluvian period. I'm just going back over some of my notes. All right, boom. So now you have a visual, hopefully, of what type of giants were being produced. Like think of like Twilight movie, they had that baby, and that baby was like what would happen, what wouldn't happen for like 3, 4, 5 years was happening in like all in her 1 year of life. Um, and so this is also a hint as to how we end up getting like Philistine giants later on that like David slayed. That is how you end up getting that in your DNA because it continues. So remember, it says in those days and for some time after. So it's still in the DNA, but not as much or bad as it was in the pre-flood times. Like it ends up being kind of wiped out of the DNA basically. Okay. Um Now we're going down. Let's read verses 5 through 8 and talk about that. So it says, the Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them. But Noah found favor with the Lord. Now, this really took me away because, y'all, it says that it broke his heart. And so I thought about that. In verse 6, it said it broke his heart for all of his creation to be evil. He said everything. He's talking about not just humans. The humans, remember, we were given dominion and authority in Genesis 1. The humans were supposed to be taking care of the animals. What are we showing the animals? What to do that's evil. I don't even think we can really conceptualize it in our modern times outside of what we would consider evil in the, like, right now, modern days would be like LGBTQ, IA, all that stuff. And then like sometimes like certain laws in the Bible would say like, oh, well, humans can have sex with animals. Like we can see those types of things, but that's the type of evil that was going on and some. And everything they ever thought and imagined was consistently. It wasn't just, oh, during this season, during this decade. No, totally evil, consistently evil, kept producing more and more and more evil. Not because they didn't know the Lord or know that who he was, because for the most part of this, like Adam was still living through almost all of this period. Adam didn't die until year 930. That he lived more than halfway through the first what we would call, he lived almost through the first millennia, but then he lived more than halfway through the antediluvian period, this pre-flood period. So like they know where they come from as humans, but they are choosing to be consistently and totally evil. So he was sorry he ever. Do y'all know how much that probably hurt God to see that the creation he designed so carefully, that he spoke into existence so lovingly, could turn into this? It's because of the influence of these sons of God. All right. So now he said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth, and I will destroy every living thing, the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and the birds of the sky. Everything I made, I'm going to wipe it away. He was willing to start fresh and do away with everything because it was so evil. That's a lot of evil. But Noah found favor with the Lord. And I thought about what it would take for Noah to live a life where everything around him is evil, all the people, everything they're doing, but he found favor with the Lord. Now, this is what it tells us about Noah that I think is like Noah is the exception of what everything else is going on. The fruit that they are producing is not fruitful. And before he ruins, because God makes a decision, right? And I'm pointing to my mind because in my mind, this is how we make decisions. Makes a decision before he acts on that decision. He finds Noah. So like it's like seeking and searching throughout the earth. he finds Noah, and Noah has favor with him. So he doesn't go through with his decision to just destroy everybody. He ends up deciding to use Noah to start fresh with Noah. So like imagine being the only person, the only righteous person amongst all the evil that's happening. And you're the one that's able to save your family because you're the one living righteous. Like sometimes I feel like Noah. Like we live in a time where people are doing any and everything. They saying any and everything, acting any old kind of way, not caring, and I'm trying to live right. And I'm like, well, let me be the one that gets to save my family because at least I got some sense. If I gotta be kind of like the sacrifice for everybody else, I'll take that because this yeah. So this is Noah. It says this is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on earth at the time, and he walked in close fellowship with God. Noah was the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, it tells us critical things about Noah. He was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on earth, and he walked in close fellowship with God. That's 3 different things. He lived the right way. It says y'all the only blameless person. Now he had 3 sons. He had a wife, and his sons had three sons with 3 wives. He was the only blameless person. So that means at the time that God is observing this and Noah finds favor, even his sons and his wife is not living right. Now, of course, if they're going to be part of this plan, they're going to have to get their life together. However, it clearly says that he is the only blameless person. It didn't say his family was the only blameless family. It said he was the only blameless person living on the earth at the time. And this is the part that is spiritual inheritance. He walked in close fellowship with God. This is where his family lineage comes into play. Let me make sure on my timeline I got it right. Noah's the father, grandfather, great-grandfather was good old Enoch. Enoch walked in close fellowship. He's the one described as walking in close fellowship with God. So Noah's righteousness is like it's passed down from generation to generation. So I'm looking to see when was Enoch died before Noah was born. But our spiritual inheritance that we pass down is critical. When the Bible describes Seth this is in 4, so I'm going to go back 2 chapters to 4, and I'm going to read you at the end of chapter 4. This is how it describes Seth's family. Seth is Adam's son that replaced Abel. This is how it describes Seth. When Seth grew up, he had a son and named him Enosh. At that time, people first began to worship the Lord by name. So when we study Seth's line, like we did last week, we start to see how the name of the Lord, the fellowship with the Lord, the communion with the Lord developed through each generation of Seth's line. And we compared that with Cain. Cain's lineage did not have that same, like people who recognize and worship the Lord, who did not have any spiritual inheritance with Cain's lineage. So now we get to the point where we're in Noah, and when Lamech had Noah, he had him and named him Noah specifically to say, like, may he be the one to deliver us. So obviously Lamech, his father, had to have some type of conscious belief in who God was as Lord and God and creator to be able to say, may he be the one to give us relief from our work and the painful labor of farming this ground that the Lord has cursed. What I'm trying to tell you is that their lineage knew the Lord. So when it comes to Noah, for him to be blameless and righteous is not happenstance. This came from a lineage of them knowing the Lord. You don't know in your lineage where your faith is needed, and so you have to maintain your faith because you pass that down, whether you get to meet that grandchild, great grandchild, great grandchild or not. You pass your lineage down. The spiritual inheritance is in your DNA. Okay, so now let's move on and get to, so we know he had three sons. I told y'all last week that I believe they're triplets because it never, when it's other children, it lists them like in a different way. And so it says when Noah was 500 years old, he had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So it just says that when he was 500, he had them. So they're triplets. Verse 11 says, now God saw that the earth had become corrupt and was filled with violence. God observed all this corruption in the world, for everyone on earth was corrupt. That's in alignment, y'all, with what he just said in verse 5 when he's talking about the extent of human wickedness. For he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. It repeats itself going back down to 11. The earth, this is good. The earth had become corrupt. The earth, not, didn't say just the people on the earth had become corrupt. This tells, you got to read the details. The earth had become corrupt itself. It was filled with violence, literally everywhere. God observed all this corruption in the world, for everyone on earth was corrupt. So God said to Noah, I have decided to destroy. Imagine being Noah. You hear this. God says, I have decided to destroy all living creatures, for they have filled the earth with violence. All living creatures, everything that creepeth and crawls on the earth has filled the earth with violence. Yes, I will wipe them all out along with the earth. God literally destroyed every single thing. So when people want to challenge y'all and say, or challenge Christians and say, well, it really wasn't a full flood, it just rained. It says, I will wipe them all out with the earth. He destroyed every, that's why I say it's hard for us to really conceptualize this, because we see land and we think that, oh, this land was like under the water, that, you know, when this land was not here like this. Nothing that we have in modern times was like this before the flood. God wiped everything out. When I say everything, I mean every single thing, wiped it all out. So imagine being Noah and hearing news that, oh my goodness, he about to destroy the whole earth. What does this mean? Who is he talking about? What am I going to do? I'm sure he's stressing. But God is talking to him, so he probably knows, he knows God's going to give him some more information. So then this is what God tells him to do. And I'm sure he's listening very intently, because if somebody tells me, if God tells me, not somebody, if God tells me that he's about to destroy the earth, I'm listening for what you're going to say next, because I don't want it to be me, and I want to do whatever it is that you're about to tell me to do. Build a large boat from cypress wood and waterproof it with tar inside and out. Then construct decks and stalls throughout its interior. Make the boat 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Leave an 18-inch opening below the roof all the way around the boat. Put the door on the side and build 3 decks inside the boat, lower, middle, and upper. I could imagine Noah just writing all the notes. He like, all right, God said that everybody is corrupt. When God says that everybody was corrupt, he means it's ruined. I'm about to destroy everything. Everything is completely ruined. Essentially he's calling it a wasteland. Like if you look up the meaning of corrupt, it's ruined and it's a waste. We took God's good creation and we utterly destroyed it. And so it wasn't that he was destroying his creation. We had already destroyed and ran through his creation. So it really wasn't probably much for him to have to destroy. He was just going to take it out so that nothing else was living on it. Because that was his gift, and we took his gift, stomped on it, spit in his face, and gave it back to him. He could not call what he saw good anymore. And so he was like, it's time to go ahead and wipe this out. Let's start somewhere fresh. Again, remember, this is a completely different landscape. This is a different geography. This is a different everything before the flood. Now, one thing that I saw interesting in this, I don't know if you all have heard, like on social media, different people do different videos. So when it says in verse 14, build a large boat, other versions say build an ark. They know what an ark is. It's a large boat. So these little pictures on y'all's children's like Bible books that just have this little bitty ark with they got the giraffe hanging out and the little elephant hanging out. That is not what the ark was. Okay. If you have not ever been to the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, you are doing yourself a disservice. Seriously, you as a believer, I think everybody has to see. They have recreated the ark, like the size and everything that it has given. You have to see that massive thing for yourself, like just to be able to really understand what Noah and his family did. Okay, so now it says build it from cypress wood, which is also called gopher wood, and waterproof with tar inside and out. So what people call themselves doing on social media is going and saying, well, y'all know gopher wood is only built in Florida. I mean, it's only grows in Florida. So why do we think that the ark and that all the story in Genesis was happening in the Middle East? Maybe it was happening in the US. Now, we got to be careful with people trying to give information and trying to question things when they are on things like TikTok, YouTube, any type of social media, with them like throwing around these questions and trying to show us maps. And just theory is okay, but you got to be careful, because remember, I just told y'all this geography did not exist. This land was not what it was. So you can't take what you see in modern times and try to apply pre-flood life into modern times. It's never going to work. You have to discard your modern view of things and only look at it from a pre-flood experience. We don't know what trees grew where, because just because they grow here now doesn't mean they didn't grow there then. So like I can't say it was in Florida or not in Florida. All I'm saying is people will put stuff like that online and get you to question stuff. And now you're questioning the Bible. Well, is the Bible really real? Did these things really happen in the USA? Or was these things happening in the Middle East? What is, like, you start to question so many other things. The only thing that it gives us in Genesis to this point, it has told us Eden. We don't know where Eden is. Nobody can pinpoint exactly where Eden was. It has told us about the rivers that flowed from Eden, and the main ones that we know of as today are the Tigris and Euphrates, and we know where those are in the Middle East at this time. But we don't know what these things really look like pre-flood. We don't know where these things really were pre-flood. So all I'm saying is when people try to come and question stuff, and it is a distraction, it is to throw you off. So don't feed into it. It's fine for them to ask the questions, but don't feed too much into it, because they're confused and they're trying to pass their confusion on to other people, and it's getting people to doubt. So then when you go back and you read the Bible and you're like, well, it could be this or it could be that, and you're not reading it for what it's saying. It never mentions any other location. We don't even know where Noah lived, to be honest. All we know is later on you'll see in chapter 9, is that the boat landed on Mount Ararat, and we know where Mount Ararat is called today. And that's actually where they found the wood and stuff from yes, they did find the ark. Of course, it's not the full ark because it deteriorated over time, but they found the ark. So I digress. So it tells them what wood to use. It tells them how to waterproof it inside out with tar. Then it tells him to construct decks. After he has built the ark, so the shell of the ark, it says now make decks installed in its interior. Then it says this is the dimensions you're going to make it. No, it didn't have to guess on anything. It says 450 long, 75 wide, 45 feet high. So I had to think about what that meant. Do y'all know that that's bigger than a football field? When it says 450 feet long, it's a little bit longer than a football field. So imagine a football stadium at your child's school, NFL, wherever. Think of it. Think of an ark fitting and taking up the space inside the stadium. Y'all know how big that is? Okay. The height of the thing, it says 45 feet high. That's like 3 or 4 stories, because most stories are like 10 feet. tall. Most like story buildings that we like think of, like if you think of like a building that you're going into, 10 feet high is the ceiling. So it goes up 4 of those. So we really have to imagine. That's why I say y'all need to really visit the Ark Encounter in Kentucky. Make it a trip. I'm telling you, you will not regret it, because you have to really conceptualize how massive this thing is. And it doesn't say it in here because we'll read it next week, but it took them 100 years to build this thing. Like, I'm telling you, this is a lot. It's a big undertaking. And you will see why it ends up taking so long. Then he tells them, well, make sure you leave an opening, what we would consider like a window, below the roof, all the way around the deck. I mean, the boat. He's telling him this is how y'all gonna be able to breathe and get fresh air, because this is going to be a long ride. Then he tell him where to put the door. It's only one door on the whole boat. The door goes on the side. 3 decks, lower, middle, and upper. He gave him all the instructions. He gave him the architectural plans on how to do this. Now, we could assume that Noah might have had some building capabilities of his own, just because, or he got the strength from the Lord to do it all with understanding how to build stuff. But this is a really, really massive, and I would love for you all to maybe even look up a video for yourself on the Ark Encounter. It is worth your time to figure out how you can conceptualize this undertaking that Noah is having to do amongst all these people who are living evil. God calls him out and says, I'm about to destroy the earth, but I'm giving you the heads up, and I want you to go build a boat, and I'm going to save you and your family. And Noah goes and does exactly what he was supposed to do. Before we wrap up, let's read 17 through 21 so we can close out. It says, look, I am about to cover the earth with a flood that will destroy every living thing that breathes. Everything on earth will die. So he told him in the beginning. He told him what to do in the instructions, and he reminds him again, look, this is what I'm doing. He probably knows that this is something that's going to take, it's going to take a while to sink in, and he don't want him to panic, but like, this is what I'm about to do, so I need you to move with some urgency. But it says, but in verse 18, I will confirm my covenant with you. So this is the overall summary of like, this is what I just said. And let me remind you that you are the covenant keeper. So enter the boat, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. When he enters the boat, he's telling him, this is what you're going to do. Like, he's telling him this before he does it, right? So he's giving him all the instructions. Bring a pair of every kind of animal, a male and a female, into the boat with you to keep them alive during the flood. Pairs of every kind of bird and every kind of animal and every kind of small animal that scurries along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. Noah didn't even have to go look for the animals that he's supposed to bring. Them animals are going to come to him. Why are they going to come to him? Because God created the animals, and he knows how to communicate to the animals so that they can go where they're supposed to go. How do birds know to fly south when it's colder months? Because that's how he designed them to be. So we can trust that he knows how to communicate to these animals that's supposed to get on this ark. And it says, and be sure to take on board enough food for your family and for all the animals. So Noah had to figure out how much food he had to have for every animal on the earth, every bear, every safari animal, every bird that you can think of in the rainforest, every cheetah type of animal, everything was on this boat. And a lot of people question, well, how could all these things get on the boat? First of all, do you know how massive this boat is? This ark is bigger than a football stadium. It has 3 decks on it. It has stalls on each deck that's built for the animals. So like, they had to design this boat to be able to fit all the animals. It is a huge boat. But also keep in mind, you don't have to have the tallest giraffe in order to save that species. You can have a baby giraffe, 2 baby giraffes. because those baby giraffes are going to continue to grow, but they're short enough to where they don't have to take up a whole lot of space or eat up so much food. Or you can have like a teenage sized giraffe. So like instead of people thinking like, oh, it's these huge elephants that can take up so much space, what if it was the baby elephants or like a more immature elephant? And by the time that the flood is over with, they have maybe matured more and more and more, but they get to mature more after the flood. Like, how do we know what size every animal was? And I just, science does so much to question what is in the Bible that I want us to just read the information instead of putting science into our Bible brain. We need to apply the Bible to this science to debunk what other people are trying to say does not exist. It's very possible for all the animals of the earth to fit on there along with 8 people and the food that all of them need. Why? Because it's a massive boat that is over the size of a football field. I don't see how we can't see that. So make sure I wish I got a plug for promoting the Ark, but y'all, Ark Encounter is awesome. And you ain't gotta agree with everybody's theology, but that they did an awesome job. And so we'll close with this. So Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him. Noah did not ask a question. He probably took great mental notes. He had all his sizes. He had his instructions. He had the why. He had the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Well, he don't know when, but he knows that I'm about to. When God says I'm about to do something, we better go ahead and believe he's about to do it, whether it's tomorrow, a week, or a year from now. He said he about to, so I need to prepare. So he had the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Everything he needed to know, he had all that information. And that is the information that he took exactly as God said, and he did exactly as God said. And it would really behoove us in this day and age to really do exactly what God says when he give us instructions. And I struggle with that myself, because sometimes we don't think that our instructions that we're getting from God is as important as Noah. Like, we're not saving the human species, so we got time. But like, we have to have that same sort of obedience that Noah had. When God says he was about to do something, he was sending a warning, he's giving instructions for something, we have to follow through. So we have to learn how to have that response. And the only way that Noah had that type of response is because he was a righteous man. He was already walking with the Lord. And that's critical. We have to get to that level because he could have that type of response because he was already walking well with the Lord. So the better we walk with the Lord day in and day out, the better we will respond to his instructions day in and day out. And so we never know what type of spiritual inheritance we are passing on to our children. And so I just want to keep that in your mind, to always be developing your spiritual inheritance, because you don't know which great grandchild is going to benefit from our spiritual DNA that we are passing down, whether they witnessed it with their eyes or it's just in their DNA. Like, it's important, and it's the most important thing. So that wraps up chapter 6 of our Bible study. Next week, we'll be diving into chapter 7, which goes further into the story of the flood. So I invite you to come back, read it for yourself, or listen to it on the Bible app, and come back so we can learn the details of this flood. And again, if you are not subscribed to the newsletter and you want the Bible study guide and things like that, you have to subscribe to the newsletter to get access to it. And that link is in the description of this video. So I appreciate everyone. And please share with someone who you know needs to learn. I'll see y'all next week. TikTok, you all can click